In this video, we're going to go from this to this. And I'm going to explain every step of the way. Yes, we are taking Mary Had a Little Lamb and we are going to reharmonize it. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean to reharmonize? Well, for our purposes, reharmonizing means keeping the same melody but changing the chords underneath. And I will explain the logic behind all of my chord selections, all of my substitutions. And if you are new to this kind of music, to these kind of crazy chords, then I'm sure you can learn a thing or two. So the basic melody looks a little something like this, and the original chords that most people play on top of this melody are just C and G, or 1 and 5 if we're thinking numerically. And that would sound something like this. So that is the normal, basic arrangement of Mary Had a Little Lamb, a very simple melody with a very, very simple chord progression underneath. As we can all see right now, the chord progression is just 1, 5. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in some other basic chords to just increase the harmonic rhythm, to get the chords changing faster, and to bring in some new harmonic complexity. So we're going to put an A minor right here on this little word right there. We're going to put an F on this third little of the first line, a G over the lamb right there of the first line, and then an A minor over the little right here, the first little of the second line. On the word fleece, we're going to put an F. And that is all we're going to do right now. On the A minors, the melody note that is being played or sung or whatever is an E, so that fits perfectly with an A minor. It's the fifth of an A minor chord, so that works perfectly. On that G that we added over the word lamb, the note being played is a G, so that works perfectly. There's nothing really harmonically complex going on until we get to the Fs. On the first F, the notes that are being sung on that word little, that's an E and a G. On the second F, on the words fleece was, those are 2 Ds. So we're playing an E, we're singing an E, a G, and Ds on top of an F. And if we're thinking about extensions of the F or how that harmonizes with the F, that gives us a 7, a 9, and 2 13s. So we're including some major extensions on top of the F, but it's still nothing really crazy. If you want to know more about extended chords, and if you really want to understand what the crap I just said, you can go watch my video about extended chords in my Jazz for the Rest of Us series. So let's take a listen to what we have so far. Okay, so now in this next step, we are going to do 2 things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our major chords and make them major 7ths. We're going to take our minor chords and make them minor 7ths. We're going to take our G, our dominant chord, and we're going to make that a G7, a dominant 7. So that will just increase the harmonic complexity just a little bit. And we also, now we're going to add some transition chords, and this is where things start to get really fun. So on this third note, on the word had, we're going to play a B flat dominant chord. And you might say, why the crap are we playing a B flat dominant chord? Where did that come from? Well, let me explain the logic behind it. So we're going to an A minor. That's the next chord in the chord progression. We're going toward an A minor. And we know that a 5-1 progression is a very strong progression. So if we wanted to do a 5-1 that leads to A, we would have to do E, A, because in the key of A, the 5 is E. So if we wanted to do a 5-1 progression, we'd have to start from E. But instead of starting from E, we're going to start from the tritone substitution of E, which would be B flat. And if you don't know what a tritone substitution is, you can watch my video in my Jazz for the Rest of Us series on tritone substitutions. But just to give a very quick explanation, when you have a dominant chord and you take the root note and you move it up 6 half steps, or what we call a tritone, the old 7 now becomes the new 3. The old 3 now becomes the new 7. And this really weird thing happens where like the chord has changed, but like the function still kind of stays the same, but it's kind of the same chord, but it's like a totally different chord. It's this weird thing. So we're taking the tritone substitution of the E. The logic behind the E is that it's a 5-1 going into the next chord of A. The logic behind the B flat is that it is the tritone substitution of E. And I personally like the sound of a B flat 13 right here. And the melody notes that are being sung on top of this chord are a C and a D, the had, and in terms of harmonizing with the B flat, that would be a 9 and a third, so that all works out great. Now we're going to put another chord between the A minor 7 and the G7. We're going to put an A flat, and it's going to be an altered chord. So the logic behind that is this. We know that a 5-1 progression is a really strong progression, and with the same logic, we know that a 2-5-1 progression is really strong. And by the same logic, we know that a 6-2-5-1 progression is really strong because they're all the same. They're all going 5-1, 5-1, 5-1. So we have an A minor 7 and a G. In the key of C, that's the 6 and the 5, but we don't have the 2. We know that a 6-2-5 would be really strong, but we don't have the 2. So in between them, we're going to put the tritone sub of the 2. The 2 would be D minor 7. We know wherever we have a minor chord, we could really also play like a dominant chord, so we could think about it as D dominant 7, a D7, and then we could take the tritone sub of D7, which would be an A flat altered chord of some sort. So we get that 2-5-1 thing going on with the 2 being tritone subbed, but still the function is kind of reserved. And we also get a half step drop from A to A flat, and then from A flat to G7. So we have this chromatic walk down going on and the kind of 2-5-1 progression. I personally like the sound of A flat, flat 5 and A flat 7, flat 5 right here, and the melody notes being played on top of it are C's, and that works out perfectly because that is the third of A flat, an A flat chord. Now, on the second lamb between G7 and F major 7, we're going to insert an E7. So obviously E minor is a part of the C major scale, and like I said, wherever you put a minor chord, you can kind of sort of put a dominant chord, and it kind of has a similar function. So we're going to put an E dominant chord right here, and that gives us a half step walk up to the F major 7, which is the next chord. So a little chromatic half step walk up right there. The note being sung on top of that that E dominant 7 is a D, so that's the 7th of the E, so that works out perfectly. Then we're going to keep the next chord, keep the next chord, keep the next chord. Then we're going to go to the second line on that word little. Instead of going straight to an A minor, we're going to do a 5-1 into the A minor. So on that word little, we're going to put an E7, and that will create a 5-1 into the A minor, which we're going to scoot over to the word lamb. And that is all I want to do on this step, so let's see what that sounds like. So things are starting to get a little more exciting. On this next step, I want to do two things once again. First, I want to add some extensions. So just like in the last step, I added 7s to pretty much everything. Now on some of the notes, I'm going to add some 9s, maybe some sharp 11s, maybe a 13, stuff like that. I'm not going to go over those one by one, but I'm just going to draw them in right here, and you can see what I added. Now we're also going to add some harmonic complexity to this second line. We're going to take an E flat major chord, and we're going to put it on top of this third note, this had, we're going to put an E flat major right there. And I suppose you could think about this as like some sort of weird major tritone sub of the 6 or something, but I didn't think about it like that at all. I don't think that makes logical sense in this context. I just think about it as a borrowed chord. And we know that when we are playing in C major, we can use borrowed chords. We can borrow chords from C minor, and that usually creates some really interesting stuff. So the 3 chord in C minor is an E flat major. So I'm going to stick that right there. And when we think about the way that the notes, the melody notes harmonize with the chord, we get something really cool, because the melody notes on the words had, are C and D, and that gives us a 13 and a 7 when harmonizing with the E flat major. So that sounds really cool. So on the second line, we have C major 13, E flat major, sharp 11, and then from there we go up a half step to the E chord that I told you guys about. So from the E flat to the E chord, we have a half step chromatic walk up, so that sounds kind of cool. We're going to go ahead and take this E chord on top of the word little and make it an altered chord. I like the sound of a sharp 9 right there. And then the A minor is going to stay the same, but on top of the word fleece, you can see we used to have an F, but we're going to take that F and replace it with a D minor. F was the 4 chord, D minor is the 2 chord. Both 4 and 2 kind of function as sub-dominant. They both like to go to 5. They both like to go to dominant chords. So that works out really well. The words fleece, was are both D notes. I mean, the melody notes right there are both Ds, so that works out perfectly with the D minor chord because that is the root note. And then on the word white, we used to have a G right there, but instead of having a G right there, we're going to take the tritone substitution of the G, and that's going to give us a C sharp altered chord. So if it was a D minor G C, that would be a 2-5-1, but we're tritone subbing the G out to retain the 2-5-1 progression function thing, but also establish a half-step chromatic walk down from D minor to C sharp altered to C. So we have D, C sharp, C. And the melody notes that are being sung on top of this C sharp altered chord are going to be E and D. So that is a sharp 9 and a flat 9. So we have all sorts of tension, all sorts of cool, jazzy, funky wonderfulness, and then that resolves down to the C major with the 1 chord. So let's see what that sounds like. So we have created a pretty harmonically complex chord progression right here. And you might be saying to yourself, Zach, that's enough. We don't need to keep going. We don't need to mess with this anymore. It's crazy enough. But I think that's nonsense. So we're going to keep going and just make this absolutely harmonically absurd. So on the 3rd chord, we used to have an A minor 9 right there. We're going to take that A minor 9. We're going to tritone sub it out for an E flat altered chord. So the tritone sub of A is E flat, and we're going to have an E flat altered chord right there. So thus, the chord progression is C major, but then after that we have something really cool. B flat 13, E flat, I like a flat 9 right there, and A flat, flat 5. So we have the B flat, E flat, A flat. That is a 2-5-1 or a 6-2-5, or however you want to think about it, but they're all tritones of something else. You could think about them as tritones of the 3-6-2. And that is all awesome. And then we go to the 5 after that. We go to the G after that. So we have the tritone of the 3-6-2 going into the 5. So we still have that 5-1, 5-1, 5-1 progression going on, but 3 of them are tritones, and that is awesome. In terms of harmony, the note that is being played on top of that E flat, flat 9 is an E, which would be a flat 9. So you don't actually have to include the flat 9, I suppose, in the chord. I just like the way it sounded. Now, after the G, after that G dominant chord, we did have an E dominant chord, but we're going to take the tritone sub of that E dominant chord and get a B flat. We're going to make it a 13. I like the way a 13 sounds right here. And the melody being played on top of this B flat 13 is a D, and that is the 3rd of the B flat chord. So that all sounds really good. And then in place of the F major 9 that we did have, we're going to play an E flat of some sort. Why? Because going from B flat to E flat creates a 5-1 progression, a 2-5-1 progression, whatever, a circle progression, however you want to think about it. But there's something really interesting going on right here with this E flat. Because as you can see, I chose to use an E flat 9. So that's not an altered chord, that's a dominant chord. Why did I use that? I actually have no idea why this sounds good. I have absolutely no idea why this sounds good. So the melody note being played on top of this E flat chord is an E. And an E note in reference to an E flat chord is a flat 9. So you would think that this chord needs to be altered, that I would need to play an E flat flat 9 or an E flat sharp 9 or something like that to accommodate for the melody note, because the melody note is itself altered. But I tried flat 9 and it was okay, and then I tried sharp 9 and it was okay, and then I accidentally tried just a normal 9, and I actually liked the sound of it. I have no idea why I like the sound of this 9 better than the rest of it. It actually doesn't make any sense, because the root note is E flat, the melody note is E, and then the extension is F. That should sound absolutely horrible, but I have no idea why I like this. If anybody knows why this sounds good, you should let me know in the comments. If anyone is smarter than me and knows why this sounds good, then you can let me know in the comments. Or if you don't think it sounds good, you can let me know that in the comments too. Now, after that, we did have a G dominant chord, but we're going to take the tritone sub of that G dominant chord and do something really cool. So the tritone sub of G is going to be C sharp. So normally here we would play a C sharp altered chord of some kind. But we're going to do something kind of cool. We're actually going to play a major chord. We're going to play a C sharp major with a sharp 11, and there's going to be a major 7. It's going to be a very major harmony. And that just kind of falls down into the 1 chord that comes after it. So it creates the half step walk down, and we have 1 major chord going into another major chord, so that sounds kind of cool. These major 7 tritone subs are fairly popular, fairly common, and they sound pretty darn cool, I think. So the note that is being sung, played on top of this C sharp chord is a G, which would create a sharp 11, which was exactly what we included in the chord itself. So I guess we actually don't have to include that sharp 11, but I thought it sounded pretty good. And then the next 1, 2, 3, 4 chords stay exactly the same. Over the word fleece, we did have a D minor 7, but we're going to take a tritone sub of that to create an A flat altered chord. I liked the sound of a sharp 5 right there. And thus we create another half step drop from the chord previous, which was an A minor, to this chord, which is an A flat sharp 5. The melody note being played on top of this chord is a D, which would be a flat 5, so that works well because flat 5 is an altered note in reference to an A flat. So that works out well. That also gives us a 5-1 going into the C sharp or the D flat, however you want to think about it. So from the A flat to the D flat or the A flat to the C sharp, that is a 5-1 progression. Once again, they're both tritones, so that sounds pretty cool. And then that C sharp, as we all know, falls down half a step to the C. And that is all we're going to do, and we have created the most absurdly harmonic complex version of Mary Had a Little Lamb that you could ever possibly imagine. Let's see what it sounds like. Ah, yes. Doesn't that make you happy? Just listening to that, just hearing that, just hearing the just complete unnecessity of all those chords. Wasn't that just beautiful? I could keep going. I could actually put like a chord on every beat and then just continue to do crazy stuff. But at some point, it really stops being music. It just starts being like harmonically complex noise for musicians to relish in. So we'll do that some other time, not today. If you learned something, I would love to know what you learned, so you could let me know that in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, you can give me a like. You can subscribe to see similar content in the future, and I hope to see you all in the next video.